Alright, so here we go. This is me just write my glaze down. Just writing out the name, the temperature it fires out, and the R just stands for reduction. So it's just me really quickly just writing down those ingredients. And this is just straight from the Glaze website. So again, it's equals 100, and then there's an addition of the colorant. So one thing I want to think about is, we have a digital scales that will weigh out one place to the right of the decimal point. Sometimes those can be a little bit more difficult. So I'm just going to write down all of those numbers that are to the right of the decimal point of that base. So where it was 0.8, 0.4, 0.7. I'm just going to add all of those together. You can use a calculator too. I'm recording on my phone, so I couldn't use the calculator function. And it's, fairly small number, so I'm gonna trust my brain piece to do this one. So I get 30, and really that's really only 3 because it's all to the right of a decimal point. And so what I have to do is just put that 3 back into the glaze recipe somewhere, and that can be into any of the different ingredients. Because really 3 grams of something, adding 1 gram to something isn't really going to matter a whole lot. So I'm going to add, first one will be to that 54.8. I'm just going to turn that into 55. That's my feldspar, so that's the largest ingredient. And then I might as well do 28 of the silica. And then I'm just going to turn that 1 of the, I think it's zinc, I'm going to turn that into a 2. Because 2 is easier to weigh out than 1. And then with my iron, I'm going to go ahead and just make that a solid 1. If I was mixing up a 10,000 gram batch, it would be 548 grams, or actually 5,480 grams. So the decimal points at a larger batch don't really matter as much. It's more of a big deal for these, or more of an inconvenience, I should say, for these smaller ones. And so I'm just adding this up on my computer to make sure I got it all right. And there we go. We got a nice even number of 100 still. Just don't have to deal with any decimal points. So here we are in the glaze room. I don't know what that was, but this is an old-fashioned. So over here there's a bunch of little containers like this that we can put on the scales. This is an old-fashioned triple beam balance. The goal is to get that to balance out at 0 before we start measuring, because depending on what container you weigh in, it's going to throw off the balance of the scale. And so there's this black bar thing on the back that I'm just going to adjust to the left and to the right until this gets the 0, or gets that white tick mark on the left there to balance out with the 0. Because we have ventilation in this room, it can be a little finicky trying to get these, and the scales are pretty old. It's pretty archaic technology at this point. So I'm just trying to get this to balance out at 0. You can do some really minor adjustments with it to try and get it there. Sometimes it can help to block a little bit of the wind stream coming in to do that. But that's what we're looking for, balancing it at 0 before we start weighing things out. Or I have a few of these little digital scales that I can let you borrow. I just don't like leaving them out. That are much easier to use. So we just want to tare this. For some reason I had a problem. I think you have to hold the tear button down to get this to 0 out once the container's on there. Even though it's not working today. But here it is. We've got it to 0 out, and now we're at just grams. Okay, and so now I'm back with my recipe, and I'm just gonna let this speed through because it's kind of, once you see me do it, it'll make a lot of sense. So I just have a container there with a little bit of water, and I'm doing this initial as 200 gram batch, but like it said at the beginning, 100 grams is more than enough. And so I'm just weighing out. I should be weighing out 100 grams or 110 grams of this Custer Feldspar, but I'm actually weighing out 55 because I forgot I was doing a 200 gram batch. So I'm going to weigh out 55 grams. Here in a second, you'll see me weigh out 55 again. But we'll get there. So I'm at about 55, and then that decimal point's going to jump a little bit. We want to be as close as we can. And I have my list out. I'm just going to make a mark every time I add an ingredient because they'll look the same, and so it can be really difficult to keep everything straight. And all of these in their powder state, I'm not really too worried about touching them. They're nothing's going to absorb into your skin or anything like that, especially these base ingredients. So there's my 56 grams of that, and now is when I realize I need 55 more grams of custard, so I'm going to grab more of that custard. And you can see I'm just dumping this all into the water. You want to be really careful not to start with too much water. If you're worried about it, you could always start with all of the dry material and then add water into it. Because if you add too much water to begin with, it's going to be too thin, and you're going to have to apply a lot of coats of your glaze, which isn't a bad thing, but it just takes more time. And if you do make it too thin, you could also always try and add more dry material as well. And so all of these containers should have little plastic spoons in, so we're not contaminating different scoops and things like that. If you find one that doesn't, there should be a box of them over by the pegboard, and just go ahead and put a box in that container that we can keep in there. Okay, bone ash, one last ingredient. Well, before we get to the stain. And now I just need some of that red iron oxide. And so one thing you'll note with this is that after I put this in, this material, red iron oxide in particular, but any of these carbonates or oxides are going to most likely stain the container pretty bad. So you just want to make sure that you clean that out really well and dry it before the next thing. Alright, so now I need to mix this up. We have some immersion blenders with whisks or the chopping blade, but we also have a hand whisk. You can use a fork. But this is going to be the most efficient. There's a high and low button on it. And here, a real nice aerial view of it mixing. It looks like mixing anything. And again, if it's too thick, I could add more water at this point. Just add a little bit at a time because a lot goes a long way, especially in a small batch. And again, if it's too thick or if it's too thin, you could just add, maybe another 100 grams of your recipe, and that would help thicken it up a little bit. That's about kind of all you can do. If it's too thin, is add more dry material. So just mixing, trying to mix it really well. It's like anytime you mix anything, you want to make sure there's no lumps in it. So I'm just going to clean this right away. I've got to unplug it. Electricity and water, not a good combo. Just make sure that it's cleaned really well inside of that mixing apparatus. There's a sharp blade, so do be careful. You don't want glaze to dry in there, especially if it's a darker glaze, because you don't want to contaminate someone else's glazes. So you always want to make sure that it's clean for the next person. I'm just going to wrap the cord up and hang it back up on the board. And the next step, I'm going to come back over here where those weigh out containers were and the scale triple beams are, and grab one of these glaze sieves. Again, like I mentioned, with mixing it really well, we're going to make sure that there's no lumps in this. So we have these two different sizes of brushes that we can use to help mix this through the sieve. And this is something that we do with all of our slips and our glazes. Obviously, when we do the big buckets of glaze, we have a bigger sieve. You can actually see it there in the background. But all those materials, they can look like they're mixed in, but they're just basically gritty material. So we want to make sure that there's no lumps, because it'll ruin the quality of your glaze and possibly your grade if that sort of thing bothers you. Just pushing it through. Trying to make sure as well as I can, to get as much as I can. There's always going to be some left in there. Now I'm going to rinse my container out, because I'm actually going to sieve it through twice, just to again make sure that it's really well smoothed out. Again, all of our glazes and slips, before they get put out, always go through the sieve twice. So it's just good practice. Again, getting as much out of that container as I can. Look at this. I'm going to just clean as I go. Make it nice and easy. Add a couple drips of glazes. Just wipe it right up. You're going to find that this is a pretty easy glaze to pass through. Some materials that are maybe a little bit coarser or kind of clump up a little bit more might be more difficult. It just depends on the material. I'm going to put that brush back. I'm going to put the sieve back. I'm just going to put all this stuff back wet. I don't really want to clog up a bunch of stuff on the sink there like it's already happening. I'm going to just clean that container out real quick because I'm about to pour glaze into it. So I've got 3 test tiles, one for the reduction, one for the soda, one for the wood kiln. And I can't really dip these, so I'm just going to pour these on. You know, what container you have is going to dictate that, but for me it's just easiest just to pour this on. I'm just going to do one nice, good even coat as I can. I'm going for that kind of nice milky consistency like we have in our glazes out in the other room. Go mix up a big glaze if you want to check consistency just to make sure. I'm just going to shake off the excess. So like I said, this was a 200 gram batch, but a 100 gram batch I think will be more than enough. So if you want, you can keep your glazes if you have some containers for that. But we also have this cylinder here that we just pour our waste glazes into, the bulk of them, and that's just so that it doesn't go down the drain. We'll fire those in a kiln until they're inert. And now I'm just putting my initials in a number 1 because this is my first glaze. On the bottom of these with some of the wash, red iron wash, because that'll stand up really well in all the kilns. And this is just so that when they come out, I have a reference point to see what glaze it is. Because there on that sheet of paper or my sketchbook, I would write number 1 by this glaze, and then just, move on down the line as I have more glazes. This, I'm just gonna just clean all of this up. I didn't mention at the beginning, but I have both exhaust fans on. I have a good mask on. I don't want to breathe any of this dust if I can help it. And last but not least, again, this is just all the this is kind of where my back was. This is just all the different materials. The bigger one's going to be your fluxes, feldspars, glass makers, clays, and the smaller ones are going to be your oxides and carbonates for colorants. And then there's also going to be the bigger bins behind here. Yep. Some of the stuff may be in there. If we're out of something, just let me know. We probably have more of it. And if I'm here, I can help you fill it. Or if I'm not here, you can just shoot me an electronic mail if you want, and I can try and describe where it is. There's this list back here of alternate names, because like I'd mentioned before, things have changed. And then we can just put those tiles on their respective shelf outside.